Hello, and welcome to The Hump with Katie Thiroux. I'm your host, Katie Thiroux, and I'm bringing you interviews with some incredible artists, finding out why are they so amazing, how did it all happen, and what can we learn from their journey. Before we get started today, I'd like to thank our sponsors, and first up, we have Jams World. Okay, I absolutely love Jams World. I'm wearing a Jams World right now, and they're offering our listeners a 15% online discount. Jams World has been family owned and operated in Honolulu, Hawaii since 1964, and I love the clothing so much because it keeps me cool and comfortable because it's made from 100% spun crushed rayon, and the artwork is fantastic. I feel like I'm wearing something made just for me. Go to jamsworld.com and use the promo code JAZZ15 and you'll get 15% off your entire online purchase. That's jamsworld.com. Next up, we have Kolstein's, and Kolstein's, I love them so much. It's one of my most favorite string shops in the entire world. Yes, that's right. They're based in Long Island, New York, and they actually just opened up another location. Anytime I'm in New York City, I go out to Long Island to see what new things they're doing. They make their own basses, strings, rosin. They do everything, and they're so knowledgeable and they're so kind. Go to kolsteins.com and use the promo code KATIE10 and you'll get 10% off your entire online purchase. Or give them a call and you'll get a discount just the same. I'd also like to remind you that I'm releasing brand new episodes of The Hump every Wednesday. So download and subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and go follow us on Instagram at The Hump with Katie. You don't want to miss a beat of what's going on over here. You guys, I am really excited to introduce you to our guest today. Her name is Nina DeCesare, and she is an amazing bass player. She is absolutely phenomenal. And that's not a word that I use that much or that often at all. And this has been one of the benefits of quarantine for myself. It's a silver lining that I actually have the time to do this podcast the way that I want to, but also I am meeting so many other musicians that I would have never met before. And I saw some of Nina's videos online and I was like, I have to talk to her. She's amazing. You have to go check out her videos. It's unbelievable. Her playing is so beautiful. It's so creative. And I call her the quietly confident one because she just kind of, she gets it all done. She's already been in the Organ Symphony and she took a position this year at the Baltimore Symphony. She's so sweet, so kind. Please go check out her music. She's amazing. I'll have links down below. So without further ado, here is Nina DeCesare. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us on The Hump today. I'm really, really excited to have you.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here. It's nice to meet you.
Yeah, I know. That's what I love about the virtual world. And even though we're in a pandemic, I don't think I would have been online as much and been able to see you perform and everything.
Yeah, I definitely feel like that too. There have been like silver linings.
Yeah.
Having to slow down and like go a different route sometimes.
Yeah. I am warning you, I got a new cat and she's just had a self-discovery of seeing her reflection. So she might make some noise, but that's cool.
Is she a kitten?
No, she's 3 years old, but she's, I think she's still in that kitten phase because it's a new place.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I'm just going to dive right in. That's just how I do it here on The Hump. First of all, I think every profession to me has a version of what the hump means to them. And for you, you're a bass player as well, but does that mean anything to you in your world?
I don't know if it means anything specific. Like maybe you could tell me what it means to you first.
Yeah, for me, I came up with this because the hump for jazz bass players or jazz musicians, we always refer to the beat. Like if something feels really good, like it's humping, or that bass player has a great hump. So that's what it means, and that's why I call this the hump. But everybody has a hump. Like even an electrician has a hump, right? Like they're a really great electrician, or I have some amazing chef friends and they've got their own hump. So that's how I feel about it.
I'm so glad you clarified because I was just thinking the hump, like you have to get over the middle of the week to.
Yeah,
so I was thinking it was like an obstacle or something.
Yeah, it's the hump day.
That
The bass physically has a hump. Like when it's on its side, it looks like a hump. So, yeah.
Yeah, or like two humps, like a camel.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Yeah, I just want to get right into it, kind of from the beginning, because you're such a fantastic bass player, and I hope one day to be able to experience you live. And I hear and see hear so many influences in your playing as well, in terms of musical. Like it's not just classical. So I definitely want to talk about that. But can you just bring me to the beginning, because I know you're also you do workshops for like smaller setups for smaller bass players. So I just want to go to the beginning of everything.
Yeah, so let's see. I started playing when I was 8. Previously, people always ask like, were your parents musicians? They kind of were. They were like in marching band in college, and like my dad was a jazz trumpet player, but now he's an engineer. My mom was also an engineer. The first concerts I went to were actually Phish concerts, which it's one of those things when you're an adult looking back, you're like, wow, that was kind of weird.
Yeah.
So yeah, they were like huge deadheads, and so like we were very used to hearing that all the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, I started playing when I was 8, and I started studying with George Vance when I was 10. And he is an amazing pedagogue. He wrote his own method books, basically. One is right here.
Yeah. How did that happen? Like, how did you get to study with George Vance? Because I know I got to do a workshop with him, but I grew up in Los Angeles. But how did you get to study with him?
Luckily, I lived outside of Baltimore. Actually, I grew up here, and he was in Silver Spring, Maryland, which is a suburb of DC. So it was only about 40 minutes from where I grew up. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of a weird story. My older brother was playing like trumpet in a jazz band for middle school, and like the bass player in that jazz band was studying with George, Kevin McGovern. And so like that kid's parents talked to my parents, and they were like, oh, you have to study with him. And so that's how it happened, basically. So yeah, that was incredibly fortunate because he just gave me such a good foundation for moving forward, and technically and musically. So yeah, I was super lucky.
Yeah, I remember even when the George Vance books. That's what I grew up. I started playing bass when I was 8 as well, and they were just like. Now the books look really nice, but they were just these spiral bound books, just like these. Almost look like makeshift books. That's really amazing. You got to study with him. So were you were studying with George Vance? So. I love his method books as well because it's not just classical music. It's kind of like a little bit of everything. So when did that come into play? Like, did you just start off playing classical music in orchestras, or was it other things you were involved in?
Yeah, I was in like the concert band and the orchestra in elementary and middle school, and I played jazz in middle school. But then, yeah, once I got to high school, I went to a very small high school, so there was not an orchestra, and there was like a very small jazz band. So I was mostly doing things outside of school at that point, like youth orchestra and stuff. And then in high school, I studied with Ali Astinfar, who's amazing, but then he moved to Montreal to be principal of Montreal Symphony. So then I studied with Ira Gold, and that was awesome, and Hal Robinson at the same time. So... yeah.
So I'm just going to go back in time a little bit because I feel like you're very modest and humble, Nina. How much were you practicing, like when you first got the bass? Because I know because I read about this. Like you won some ISB competitions, like when you were a teenager. So like, how much were you practicing? Did you enjoy it? Was it something that you just looked forward to?
Oh yeah. I absolutely loved the bass from the very beginning. And I had all of these, like, I was kind of studying piano, and I had these like Disney piano books, and I would just like come up with my own arrangements for everything. And I was probably playing for like 2 or 3 hours a day in elementary school. And then I feel like once I started studying it more seriously, it began to feel more like it was more difficult. So then I was practicing less, but I was probably getting more done. And then in high school, most of the time I was practicing like 2 or 3 hours a day. There were some periods where I was practicing very little, but I think that's pretty normal for a high school student.
Yeah. And since you didn't have an orchestra at your school, was there a youth orchestra that you were able to be in?
Yeah, I was in the Maryland Youth Symphony Orchestra.
And were the other, at least bass players around you, were they as serious as you were? Like, did you have a community of like support of other kids?
Yeah, totally. George Vance's studio was like very close knit because we had these Saturday classes. So Lindsay Orcutt is another awesome female bass player. I think she's in Chicago Civic right now, but we actually grew up like 2 miles from each other, and our parents were friends. So yeah, there was her, and there was like a few others, and we all kind of like our paths were crossing for like 6 or 7 years. So yeah, there's definitely like a little community. And then I did summer festivals too. So like Interlochen was always like the highlight of my entire year.
Yeah. It always helps when you have, like, no matter what you're doing as a kid, like, you're all doing it together. Like, even if you're skateboarding or playing sports or something, like, you guys are all getting better together.
Totally.
I think it's kind of a nice thing too about everyone on Instagram. Like, they're doing these practice accounts and, you know, they're putting themselves out there. It can get a little intense. You know, people are a little over emotional about it, but I still think it's nice. Like, you can have this like international support of other people. Like, yep, I've been there. I was, you know, my practice was a little tough today, so it's kind of nice. Yeah,
I think it's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, I would have liked to have that growing up myself. So, but that's okay. So you were playing classical music, but you said you were in a jazz band. Was there ever like, did you have that moment when it was like, okay, I'm going to pursue a classical career?
I think really early on when I was studying with George, he pretty much assumed that I was going to go that direction. Mm-hmm. I don't know if he knew that I was going to be like an orchestral musician or something, but he was pretty much like, you're going to do this, right? When I was like 11 or 12, and I was like, I guess so. I don't know. I wasn't thinking about things very deeply back then, but yeah, so he kind of, you know, encouraged me in that direction. And I think often if you're like considered good at something when you're a kid, it's really easy to like latch onto that and like have it like be your thing. And then at some point you'll have to decide like, is this really what I want to be doing? Yeah. So I kind of had like that reckoning, like my senior year of high school. I was kind of like, all right, do I actually want to go the music route, or like, would I be happier doing something else? And at the end of the day, you know, I ended up here. So
yeah, exactly. Did you have something else though, like other than music, that interested you, that might have pulled you in a different direction?
Honestly, no.
Yeah.
If I had, I might have gone in a different direction. I don't know.
Yeah. And then just tell me a little bit about, because I want to talk about like orchestra auditioning and things like that. But even doing that ISB competition, how old were you when you did that?
Let's see. I won the younger division when I was 13, and then the older division when I was 17. Yeah. And I don't know.
What was it like for you then? Were you always kind of like, was there any nerves involved, or was it just kind of like, I'm here, this is what I do?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I think when I won the younger one, I think I was just really happy that it worked out that way.
Yeah.
And then I think I put too much pressure on myself for the older one. You know, but I worked really hard and it ended up working out, which is great. But what I know now that I wish I could have told myself then is like, with competitions, at the end of the day, it's kind of sad because a bunch of people show up and they play these beautiful recitals, and you know, everyone has something different to offer that's amazing. But the committee's job is to pick someone. Yeah. And it's just super subjective. So it doesn't, you know, competitions don't actually mean anything.
I know.
It's just something to work towards. But I don't know. That's a tricky subject with kids in competitions because it can feel like, you know, it's like a pass-fail thing. Yeah. And yeah.
That's so true. But like you said, it's just a nice goal, something to work towards. And I remember one of my mentors is John Clayton, and I think it was the ISB, and he was just like, he had won, and he was, or some competition, he's like, but this other person was so good, like, why? You know, we're all great in our own different ways. So I totally hear you on that, especially even playing the same piece. Everyone can play the Kusevitsky or the Draconetti, and it's going to sound differently, and we're going to perceive it differently. So I want everyone to be happy, you know, when they do competitions.
Definitely.
Yeah. So what was like your first gig? Were you in high school?
Like the first time I played for like professionally, like for money?
Yeah.
Well, I guess my first gig was for Sugarland Baptist Church outside of Houston. Mm-hmm. For thousands of people Sunday morning at like 8 a.m. But yeah, then later I ended up subbing with the Houston Symphony. Mm-hmm. My first concert was a set of Pops concerts. It was like television music. Mm-hmm. It was interesting programming.
So you were in university at that point?
Yeah. I think I was my senior year or maybe it was, sometime towards the end of my undergrad, I think.
Mm. The interesting thing about music, no matter what genre you play, it's kind of like you really have to move around a little bit, even, deciding which school you're going to go to. It's not always in your hometown. So, so where did you did your undergrad?
Oh yeah, I went to Rice University in Houston. I studied with Ellison, and I was there. I did my undergrad, and then I started my master's, and I started taking auditions, and ended up in the Oregon Symphony in Portland, Oregon. And I was there for 5 years, and we just moved to Baltimore this past summer. So now I'm here in the Baltimore Symphony.
That's amazing. And do you feel when you got the audition for Oregon, were you auditioning other places? Did you have that idea like, well, if I get it, I'm going to go, or I want to finish my studies? How was that for you?
Yeah, as soon as I started my master's, I was kind of like, I'm going to hang out here until hopefully I'm able to win an audition, or then I'll have to figure out somewhere else to go. It was always kind of like, that was the end goal at that point for me. Just because I liked the idea of like, a level of security. So yeah, I took my first audition. It was for principal of Houston Symphony. And obviously I was in Houston, so that felt like a good, like, safe one to take, but I also thought I had like no shot whatsoever. And I worked really hard, and that one ended up paying off because I got to the finals. But they chose the other two to give trials to, and they were much more experienced and like much more prepared. So, and Robin Kesselman ended up winning, so I was really happy for him. So yeah, and then I took another audition in St. Paul Chamber Orchestra, and then Oregon was my third audition, and that one ended up working out. So,
and what's your process like getting ready for auditions?
Well, so usually, I don't know, it's kind of always being refined because I think I've taken like 12 now, and I won 2 of them, but the other 10 were, it's not easy when it doesn't go well.
Yeah.
So you're constantly like tweaking and like, okay, what happened this time? So what has worked consistently is like being very organized in my process, and then doing lots of mock auditions, like playing for friends and colleagues, and then like recording myself a lot. And yeah, one of the most important things for me, whether it's like a recital or an audition, like the week before, I have to stop like practicing and get into like performance mode.
Yeah.
Because the worst thing that can happen is like when you're playing something in the audition and you're like, critiquing yourself and like micromanaging yourself because you're still like in that mode of like, how do I make it better, rather than just like, playing music for the committee, because they really want to hear music, regardless of if your articulation is absolutely perfect in every single note. Like what they really want is like a solid presentation of playing. So yeah.
Do you also get into there's your puppy. Do you also get into like the sound of that orchestra? Like, would you listen to tons of recordings of that specific symphony?
Well, yeah, I definitely listened to a lot of recordings of the excerpts. Hold on one second. Okay, she might not stop. Yeah, I definitely listen a lot to like what the excerpts are from, so that I can hear like what the orchestra would be playing in my head. Yeah, some people talk about like trying to mimic the sound of the orchestra or like play like they do, but in my experience, it's a better idea to just like present like what I would do. Yeah. Because that feels the most real to me. And if it's authentic, then like they'll understand it. And if it's a good match, then maybe you'll win, Not everyone fits into every single sound everywhere. So
yeah, I remember that one time sitting in, my sister manages a youth orchestra, the American Youth Symphony. And it was the same thing. I was listening to like all the principal violinists, the concert master seat, and I'm like, well, they all sound great, but they all sounded really different. So it was cool. No pressure for me because I was just listening from behind the curtain. But it's different from like a jazz like setting, like a quartet or even a big band. Usually you just get either recommended like, oh hey, I just played with Nina last week, she sounds great, let's try her out. Or if you want to play with somebody and there's an opening, you kind of like, okay, let me learn all their records, the songs they like, and kind of like fit into that and also bring your own thing. So it's kind of cool with the differences right there.
Yeah. Well, it's tricky too, because in an orchestra, you're playing in a bass section. So
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, it has to be like, okay, we're blending. Like, does this person sound like they'll be able to, fit in?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm just going chronologically. So you win the audition spot in Oregon. Like, how excited were you?
I was very excited. And like 4 of my closest friends from Rice were at that audition with me, also auditioning. So we all went out and, saw Portland that day, and they were really happy for me, which was incredibly nice of them. Yeah, it was nice. It was a relief for sure.
And that was your first time like being in an orchestra. Was it full time?
Yes.
So what was that adjustment, being in an orchestra full time? Because I know it's not just the concert, there's rehearsals and then self prep and all that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of a big adjustment to go from, especially at Rice, we would prepare a concert for like a month and a half, so the same, hour and a half of music for that long. And then to go from that to like, okay, you have 4 rehearsals.
Mm-hmm.
And the conductor's always different and like all these moving parts. So yeah, there's definitely like a learning curve figuring out like what you need to do to prepare and like what's most helpful and what actually isn't helpful. And yeah, my recommendation for anyone starting an orchestra job is like use the first 2 months and do nothing else. Just try to figure out like what you need to do to feel prepared, because it can be really stressful and you're trying to get tenure. And yeah, it was definitely a stressful transition for me, but I've been thinking about that a lot now that I just joined the Baltimore Symphony, and how like more grounded and prepared I feel just from having the experience of playing in an orchestra before. So I'm glad that's behind me.
Yeah. And I know, because it's like, maybe if you want to teach on the side too, like it's kind of hard to have a private studio at the beginning and do a full-time orchestra position, because you're just kind of beat at the end of the day, right?
Definitely. Yeah. It's funny because, I mean, when you look at the schedule, it doesn't look like it should be that tiring, but you just have to be so focused and on for all the rehearsals and concerts. It's, yeah, 2 hours of rehearsal can be very tiring.
Mm-hmm. But I bet within 5 years, you probably played music that you hadn't played before, and so now, especially going to Baltimore, it's like you're just accruing that much more. I mean, in a sense, like just repertoire. So then if you guys play something you've already played before, it's kind of like, okay, not that you're gonna rest, but you're like, okay, I've done this before. It's not brand new.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, have you gotten to play with the orchestra yet, or not yet because of?
Yeah, actually, we've been playing every week since the beginning of September. Basically, we're recording concerts, but then they're like splicing the different pieces and with like documentary style interviews and like behind the scenes. That's coming out every Wednesday. So yeah, it's been great. We're doing smaller ensembles too, which is always really fun. So like the first few weeks it was like just strings and like groups of like 18 of us. Then we started adding like some winds, and we have like a Baroque week coming up, which I'm really excited about. So yeah, it's been really nice. I don't know. It's weird starting a job like this. But it's also like we're getting to play all of this interesting music because it's a totally different format than usual. And we're highlighting all kinds of composers like Jesse Montgomery. And yeah, it's been kind of fun to shake it up.
Yeah, it's kind of nice not to like pare down some of like the classics like Beethoven and Mozart into, like 20 people. So that's kind of cool, like having the music dictate what you guys play because of the instrumentation. That's awesome. Tell me a little bit about, because I know you've done workshops on setup for smaller bassists. I don't know, you don't look small to me, like when you're playing, because I don't know, maybe if your bass is smaller, but so tell me a little bit about that, because that's important, like no matter what size you are, just getting the right feel around the instrument.
Yeah, it's super important. Yeah, I actually got pretty injured when I was in college, my freshman year. I mean, I was practicing like an idiot, like 6 hours a day, just like running through like the second suite over and over. Yeah, that was not my finest moment. And of course I ended up with like nerve injuries. And so basically I spent my entire sophomore year trying to figure out like how I could like use my body in a like more efficient, better way. And I was really lucky that I was at Rice with Paul Ellison because he definitely like specializes in that, and it's a huge priority of his. So yeah, I kind of like was tweaking my setup for a while until I could figure out, because especially like my solo bass is, as you can see, it's like, the top is really small, and the string length isn't that long. It's only 40 and a half. But orchestra basses obviously are like much bigger. So trying to figure out, with the goal of getting a orchestral job eventually, trying to figure out how I could like get around it and not injure myself for the amount of, practice time that I needed to be doing. So yeah. And what works best for me is like extra yoga blocks and like a stool that tilts forward. My bassist, sorry, I should have, oh no, what did I do?
We're slightly frozen. There we are.
Sorry. Wait, I can't see you. There we are. Sorry. I tried to get rid of a notification.
All good.
Yeah. What was I talking about?
Your bass size.
Oh, yeah. My orchestral bass also has a string length of 40 and a half. So it's the exact same as my solo bass, but the top is just a little bit bigger. So yeah, there's been some tweaking, and especially with tilting my stool forward, that was like definitely like a aha moment of like, oh, this is how I can like drop my weight in better, because I'm not like very, very small, but I am 5'4", and my arms aren't very long. So like, I can't just like stretch out in every direction and like expect that my body is going to be able to like hold up forever. So
yeah. So well, did you come up with that yourself, like tilting the stool forward? That's a great idea.
Yeah, Paul Ellison, that's definitely something that he recommends. And cellists actually do it a lot too. And it just kind of, it is tricky because it requires you to like have a strong core, because you don't want to like collapse over the top of the bass, right?
Exactly.
You want to like, hold yourself up, but then also be like perched. Yeah. It's hard to demonstrate without my bass, but
well, the listeners will get a picture. Yeah, I love Paul Ellison, and I did one masterclass with him, but I know all of his teachings through John Clayton, John Clayton loves Paul Ellison. So I love all his tips about even finding the right bass height, and he's fantastic.
Yeah, he really is.
So you've had some amazing teachers.
Yeah, I'm so lucky.
Are you teaching right now privately?
I have one student. When I left Portland, I mainly stopped accepting students and then left some of them behind. I have one online student still. But honestly, with this year, everything going on, it was easier to kind of take a break from teaching so much right now. So
yeah. Well, it's nice that you're back home, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Then something I wanted to ask you is like the female presence in orchestras. I'm not sure. I'm just an outsider, and I grew up playing classical bass and in orchestras and things like that. But I feel like there's more of a drop off from high school girls playing jazz music, like even in high school and then after high school. But for some reason, I remember being in youth orchestras, and it's just kind of like, okay, boys and girls, we're all doing it. And I don't feel like there's so much drop off afterwards, but then like into college, but then you get to the professional orchestras, and then there is a definite drop off of, gender equality there. So how do you see it from your point of view? Yeah.
And that's the puzzle piece that I feel like a lot of other instrumentalists don't realize, is how many like female bass players there are in like middle and high schools.
Yeah.
And even in college to some degree. They just kind of assume that like less women decide to even play the bass, which just isn't true. But yeah, it's hard to know. I mean, the audition process is really, really grueling, and it can be kind of demoralizing. And I think across the board, men are encouraged to have more confidence, like from a very early age. And then there's definitely like a very bro-y atmosphere that leads them to, continue to cultivate the confidence.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think in things like that, a lot of it can come from like us second guessing ourselves. And then, of course, there's like probably an implicit bias because no one's used to seeing, women bassists in orchestras as much as they should be. And so, I think there's definitely like a moment when they see a woman walk onto the stage in the finals, like, wait,
yeah,
like they want to, even if they're trying not to be sexist, they're kind of like, wait, that's not what I thought I was going to see. You know what I mean? And I've even had people tell me that after I've won auditions, and it's just like, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah. Was that something that you dealt with, like, from the beginning of bass, like as a kid? Like, did you ever struggle with that, or was it like, did people make a big deal out of it? Because no one made a big deal, and I'm glad when I was growing up, like, I just did my thing. Maybe I just wasn't paying attention to it, so it wasn't. I would feel really fortunate to not have had that struggle, and also like being a jazz bass player, I'm usually the only one, anyways. In a group, it's just me. So, and in a rhythm section, it's 3 or 4 people. So I didn't feel like an outcast in that way. But did you ever struggle with that?
Honestly, I didn't even really think about it like at all until I started my first job, because in college there was always like several of us. I think I was the only one in Paul's studio, but the other teacher, Tim Pitts, had several female students the whole time I was there. So it just didn't feel like a huge thing, and we definitely didn't talk about it at all. But then, there was some experiences I had in Oregon that I was suddenly like, wait. I had a board member make a joke to me about how I looked like a 12-year-old. So that was, rude. So I don't know. It's one of those things where like you think about it and then suddenly you realize like 1,000 situations. And you're like, oh, okay, well, I'm glad I didn't worry about this before. But then like, it's like Pandora's box, like it's there all the time. So,
well, and I know like, I think this is more for women than men, but like, the ubiquitous person going like, oh, you wish you played the flute, right? And the last time someone said that to me, I said, yeah, I wish I had a flute so I could, hit you over the head with it. That's the only reason why I wish I played the flute. Because I wouldn't want to ruin my
I feel like
bass.
that's one of those things I would always think about and like forget to say.
Yeah, but it's just funny. It's like people feel like they can say that to women, but you wouldn't usually say that to, some dude holding a bass.
Yeah. Well, and now it's tricky because now that we're all kind of having these conversations, and it's like, how can we get more women in orchestral bass sections? And I mean, the best thing that we can do ourselves is just like be very visible and like encouraging and like mentor like younger women. So that kind of sometimes feels like a burden. I would love to just be like doing my job and be like, oh yeah, I'm just a bassist in the Baltimore Symphony, but like I can't escape the fact that there's so few of us.
Even like women in general, like how in a symphony, like is it pretty spread out right now in your view, like in all the sections?
Well, I would say the sections where it's obviously not cut up would be bass section, the brass section, and the percussion section. And in my experience, the rest of the sections look somewhat balanced. But I think it depends to like, the caliber of the orchestra and things like that. So.
Good. Yeah. I'm just curious. I mean, cause it's kind of the same thing in jazz music too. It's just kind of like that, where is everybody? They're there.
Yeah.
I'm also fascinated by the repertoire that you choose to play. I mean, not that you choose to play, but like you'll put, I loved what you did for Deep Tones for Peace. You did the Round Midnight, and I've seen videos of you doing Misty and Spain. So like, do you listen to jazz, or do you have some favorite jazz bass players?
My dog is actually named Misty.
Oh, how sweet.
Because of the ballad. Yeah.
Nice.
Honestly, this sounds awful, but I don't listen to much jazz.
It's okay. We're not gonna, it's fine.
I feel like when I'm not like actively like listening to classical music to prepare for things, I end up listening to things like Lizzo and Billie Eilish, and just kind of as a release, like something totally different.
I love
or like
Lizzo.
The Brothers. Yeah, me too.
You should do a flute duet with her. That would be amazing.
That would be amazing. I think I sent her a message on Instagram once, but like I'm sure she gets like a million a day. So she didn't respond. But yeah, my husband is actually an electric bassist. And he has a really strong background in jazz because he's from Kansas City. So yeah, I kind of leave it to him mostly.
Okay. Yeah. But I love the arrangements you do. Was it Misty? I think so. Yeah, but the things you do are just so creative. So is that just, you're just doing it off the cuff, or like how long do you work on these things?
Well, I feel like I go through periods where I have all this extra energy to like come up with arrangements or like play solo music, usually in the summer when I'm not doing my job. Definitely during the pandemic, that was like a nice chance to like experiment with new things and like play lots of different music. But yeah, I think a lot of those arrangements I was doing my first year in Oregon. And I was kind of missing, like, because in college I played so much solo music. And so I was really missing that. And I just met my husband, who was then my boyfriend, and he loved jazz. So it was kind of like a fun, like, collaboration thing between the two of us. But yeah.
Nice. My husband's a drummer, so that's
cool.
It's always fun to have someone to play with, especially during the quarantine.
Yeah.
So like, how much are you practicing these days?
Well, let's see. We were playing some really crazy stuff a month ago, and like it was like hours of preparation for a couple of those concerts.
Really?
Yeah, really, really crazy. There's this composer named Bryce Dessner, who's like, he used to be in some like rock band, but he just wrote this absolutely nuts piece. But but I've been off. I was off last week. I'm off this week, and I'm off next week. So I'm kind of taking a little bit of like a rest period.
Yeah.
I'll probably practice more soon.
That's important though, and like I know, man. Again, I keep talking about John Clayton. Like, he is one of those people. Like, he's so busy doing everything else other than playing bass sometimes, like being an artistic director, producer, writing music. And so I feel he's just has like years of practice already under him. So he can go play some concert without having played for like 3 months and just blow it away. I mean, he might have, some bloody fingers after it, but I kind of, not that I do that myself. I try and, keep everything up, but technique is technique. And like, if you've learned it really, really well, like I know you did with George Vance, that doesn't really go away, for me at least. I mean, if something goes awry, okay, I know how to fix it. It's not like I have to start from square one every day.
Totally. And I feel like your muscle memory is always there. And also, like, once you've taken a few breaks before, like what you have to do and how long it'll take to like get back in shape.
Yeah. One time I did take a break for a month of, it was like around December, and I came back to a gig with a really great leader, and that was kind of rough because it was just not having performed live for like a month was rough. So I learned my lesson. Okay, there's other things I can do to work out those muscles. Like, okay, I'll play along to recordings and all sorts of things. Because once you have that feeling, I don't know if you've had that, where you're just, it's not that I was unprepared, but it just was not, I wasn't cutting it. So I never wanted to have that feeling again.
Yeah, that definitely, I've had that feeling. Like, sometimes we'll play these like movie concerts, like Harry Potter or like Star Wars. And anything written by John Williams is always like 1,000 times harder than, because you think, oh yeah, we're playing Harry Potter, it'll be fine. And then, you maybe look at it for a couple minutes and then you're mostly sight reading and it's like, what was I thinking? Especially like with a stand partner next to you and you're just like crashing and burning. I've definitely had that experience.
Yeah, you just got to go, sorry, I'm going to do better next time.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, when we mess up, it's still just music. It's not like we're surgeons and people are dying.
Yeah, luckily not. So what do you do for fun? I see that I feel like you do like Harry Potter.
Yes, I do like Harry Potter. I have 2 dogs. One is Misty. She's sitting on the couch. She's not allowed on right now. And she's 6. And then the other one is an adolescent that we adopted this past year. So we've been puppy raising for a long time, and he's a combination of like incredibly intense dogs. So intense. Yeah. So we're doing a lot of training.
Nice.
Lots of training. Yeah.
So that's your release, other than music, just dogs?
And cooking, yeah.
And
we also cook a lot.
Oh, cool. Yeah. What are you cooking these days?
Well, we joined this like CSA, we're like this organic farm. It's actually a women-owned organic farm. They like deliver veggies, and it's always random weird veggies. So we got this great like vegetable cookbook, and we just kind of, pick a recipe and go for it. So that's been really fun.
I have this theory that bass players, I would say like 99% of bass players love to cook.
Yeah. Yeah, and our kitchen in Portland was awful, so, and we have a really nice kitchen here. So it's been really nice to be like, oh my gosh, like, we can cook and not be, like, tripping over each other and, like, cleaning every 5 seconds. So, yeah, it's been really, really nice.
Nice. And then I won't keep you on for too much longer, but what's coming up? I know even in this situation, is there anything new happening?
Well, we hopefully have 3 more weeks of after Thanksgiving of like performing in December, but with the COVID cases rising right now, we're kind of like on the edge of our seats, like what's happening.
Yeah.
So hopefully that happens. Otherwise, something I've really been wanting to do, I prepared the whole 5th cello suite for a recital this past summer, and then I did it for like a BSO live stream recital, and I ended up being way more nervous than I thought I was, because I was just here in my living room.
Isn't that crazy? When we're live streaming, it is a whole different ballgame than playing for people. I feel the same way.
Yeah, and it was before I had actually started with the orchestra too, so it was like, oh, I hope they like me, and so yeah, I was more nervous than I meant, and I had a couple of memory slips. So what I want to do is like come back to that and like do like an actual video recording. For like YouTube or something. But that would require me to like pick up my solo bass again, which I haven't really done, and have enough time to like practice Bach. So yeah, hopefully that will happen at some point. I hope that BSO doesn't end up canceling any more concerts, but we just have to take it one day at a time.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I hope to hear the Bach cello suite.
Yeah, we'll see.
Cool. Thanks so much, Nina. This was so much fun for me. So great to meet you.
Yeah, it was so nice to actually meet you.
If you have any parting words, you can leave some parting words with us, but I'm going to put your links to your YouTube and your Facebook and your Instagram so people can check out your amazing music. You're quite humble and modest, so I'm excited for people who haven't heard you to listen to you, because they'll be blown away, just like I was. And thanks so much. This was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Do you mind if I take a picture for the BSO?
Yeah, sure.
Like Instagram takeover. Okay. All right, thank you.
Cool. All right, take care.
It's really nice to meet you.
Yeah, likewise.
Bye. Have a good rest of your day.
Bye, Misty.